Hey guys, it's me, Carl. These are my tips for staying sane while in quarantine. Tune a banjo. Take a nap. It's one of the best ways to kill some time. Boost your confidence by fishing for compliments from a friend.
What about me do you like?
Call your Mama.
No, Mama. Planet of the Apes is not based on a true story.
Make sure to keep good hygiene. Google image TJ Maxx, just for the fun of it. Read a book.
The rum is always gone.
Tell secrets to your dog.
I killed a man.
Think of a new idea, like turning on a lamp. Become a peanut butter monster.
I'm a peanut butter monster.
Get to know your houseplants better.
I once ate 3 dozen eggs in one sitting. I haven't been the same since.
Scream. Take a nap. Start collecting cow manure. Wow, what a stack. But then realize you're not supposed to be outside, so quickly run back inside. Self-reflect. Is this really me? How did I end up in this body? What even is a body? And how are we all in these bodies on this giant rock floating through infinite space of nothingness? A dark, vast, cold, eternal nothingness. And then you realize how hungry you are. Cook an egg. So yeah, that's pretty much the video. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed all these tips for staying sane while in quarantine. It's obviously helping me, so I'm sure it'll help you. Seriously, I've never been better.
Sometimes I'm afraid of the dark. To be honest, I've never seen a baby pigeon. I think Power Rangers is actually a really good show, and it was before its time. I haven't paid my taxes in 10 years. To be honest, I don't even know what a tax is. At this point, I'm just too afraid to ask. Turtles actually freak me out. To be honest, I lost my toothbrush about a month ago.
Hey students, before we dive into our next lesson on the prayer rhythms of Jesus, I wanted to recap from last week. And last week we learned that Jesus started his ministry with 40 days and 40 nights of prayer and fasting. And in that, hopefully you took away that it is important that in everything we do, we start with prayer. Every decision we make, everything, every single day, we must start it in prayer. And so we're going to continue learning what it means to pray like Jesus today. And so I wanted to recap that with you, get your mind focused on all that, and enjoy this lesson and soak it up and ask yourself, what are the disciples doing in the story? What is Jesus doing in the story? And how is this going to apply to me? How can I relate this to me to where I can take this and learn from it and better my prayer life? Because as followers of Jesus, we must pray like Jesus. Let's dive in. Hey students, welcome back to our second part of the series of the prayer rhythms of Jesus. And I'm so excited to be teaching this to you. And I wanted to open up with a personal story about when I first started student ministry at Quitman First Baptist Church. We went on this mission trip. It was the first big trip that I took with them as their youth pastor. Like big trip meaning out of state, and all of that. It was a great trip. I've never been on a trip, especially early on in student ministry. I was young. It was a trip that I will never forget because I saw God move in so many ways in the lives of our students. We all saw life transformation take place that week at Mission Arlington, which was where we were at. And we actually saw some miracles, believe it or not, that God just allowed us to experience as a group. And I think it was so that we would never forget His power and we would never forget His ability to move in the unlikeliest of circumstances. And so as we wrap up that week on the mission trip, as great as it was, at the end of every great trip is exhaustion. And I want you to think about a trip that you took, whether it be a family vacation or a missions trip or a camp or whatever, where God moved in such a great and powerful way, but you get back at the end of the day, it was, whether it was a day trip or a week-long trip, it was exhausting. And think about how you feel, how you felt when that happens. And what if your parents ask you to do something? What are you going to say? Like if you get home from camp and your parents ask you to clean your room or do whatever, like it's probably not going to be good. Our attitudes typically aren't good, even though what we just experienced over a week long or a day long was a God moving experience. Sometimes if we don't allow that to have an eternal impact, we can leave that moment and forget about what God has called us, how God has called us to live, and not just at camp, but at home and at school. And so I want you to think about those things as we open up to Mark chapter 1 here in just a second, and we're going to read this, and we're going to look at the disciples and Jesus as they go on their missionary journey together. And I want you to pay attention to the disciples. I want you to pay attention to Jesus, and I want you to pay attention to what is going on in the scriptures, because I'm not going to read it all word for word, but I'll highlight a few things along the way. If you go to Mark chapter 1, this is after the temptation of Jesus that we discussed last week. This is after that. And so he starts collecting his disciples, right? He starts saying, "Hey, follow me, follow me." He goes to some fishermen, Simon Peter, right? And his brother were out there at sea with his dad, and Jesus walks up and says, "Follow me." And so they drop everything they're doing and they leave their father to go follow Jesus. And so they follow God, or they follow Jesus on his journey. And so he goes to Capernaum, to the synagogue, right? And so he starts to teach them, and all of a sudden a man with an unclean spirit comes into the synagogue. And whereas most of the religious leaders would have rebuked him, or most of the people would have thrown him out, Jesus didn't rebuke the man, but he rebuked the spirit, the unclean spirit within the man. And so he performs this miracle, and everybody sees this, and it's just like, oh my gosh. And everybody was amazed. And they're like, what is this? This guy has authority, right? And so he commands unclean spirits. And then as soon as they left the synagogue, they went to Simon and Andrew's house with James and John. So there's 4 disciples here. And Simon Peter's mother-in-law was lying in bed with a fever, and she was really sick. So they went over to her with Jesus, and they took her by the hand and raised her up, and the fever left her, and she began to serve them. When the evening came, again, so this is a full day of traveling and teaching and miracles. When the evening came, the sun had set, they brought him all those who were sick and demon possessed. So people started hearing about what Jesus was doing, and after the day was over, they were bringing people to him to be healed. Right? And so this was a really long day. He probably went to bed really, really, really late at night. So go back to that first story where I was talking about just being exhausted after a long week of mission work and doing some incredible things and having some incredible experiences. That's where they are at on this missionary journey with Jesus. That's where the disciples are at. That's where Jesus is at it's been a long day. But verse 35 is where I want to hone in on right here. And it says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark. Now, obviously, it's not dark, but it is pretty early. I know Tony and I probably both got up while it was still dark this morning. But while it was still dark, early in the morning, he got up, he went out and made his way to a deserted place. There's that word again that I said wrong last week. I said Eremos or something like that, but it's Eremos or Eremos, all right? And so he went to Eremos. He went to his deserted place, and there he was praying. So, long day. What we learn from this is, let's recap and remember that when Jesus started his journey, he started with a month and a half of prayer. He beat Satan in a scripture battle, and then he started his missionary journey, right? And so after all of that, that's what happens, and that's where we're at. And still, Jesus gets up early in the morning to pray. And it's been a long time. I mean, he's had an exhausting day. I know he's Jesus, but he's also still human, right? One of the many, oh my gosh, what's the word I'm trying to think of? One of the many wonders, the mystery of God, right, is that he's human. In Jesus, he is human and God at the same time, but he still feels that exhaustion. Yet he gets up early in the morning while it's still dark, and he prays. So here's the point. Prayer is an ongoing rhythm of Jesus. Prayer is an ongoing rhythm of Jesus. But then look here. Simon and his companions searched for him. And when they found him, they said, "Everyone's looking for you." And he said to them, let's go to the neighboring villages so that they may preach there too. This is why I've come. So that's Jesus for no. And what you need to know is that when you pray and when you're constantly praying, and prayer is an ongoing rhythm in your life, is God will give you that discernment to say no and to say yes. He will direct you in the ways that you have to go or that he wants you to go, right? And so that's very important for you to do, is that is to make prayer an ongoing rhythm of your life. So I want to fast forward to Mark chapter 6. Mark chapter 6, again, they're constantly just on this journey doing things, and Jesus is teaching, and the disciples are witnessing and miracles. And again, Jesus is becoming more and more popular and more busy, because as he does these miracles, the more people are trying to get to him to be healed, and they're bringing their family members and all of that to him. And we won't read this whole story, but I want to read a part of it to you. So the apostles gathered around. We're in verse 30 of chapter 6 in the book of Mark. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him, and they had all that they had done and taught. He said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a remote place and rest for a while." For many people were coming and going, and they did not have time to eat. So again, they continue, and lots of people interrupting their day. In verse 32, so they went away in the boat by themselves to a remote place. There's that word, Eremos. But many saw them leaving and recognized them and ran to them on foot in the towns ahead of them. And so they're trying to get away, but the popularity of their journey, of what Jesus is doing, has created this interruption of constant busyness where the people are just wanting Jesus to be around him and to hear him teach and to perform these miracles, and they can't get away. And so the second half of this ongoing prayer life is that we got to have an ongoing prayer rhythm in our life, even when we're exhausted and even when we get busy. So what does your prayer life look like right now? Students, you've been granted this unbelievable amount of time. Now, I don't know what that looks like for you as individuals. I'm sure some of you, to some degree, are still busy, but you've been stripped away from the normal busyness that you used to have, and you've had an opportunity to hit a reset button. And now's the chance. If you haven't started in these last 5-6 weeks that we have been in this mess of quarantine and all this stuff, if you haven't started right now, now is your chance to begin this ongoing prayer rhythm in your life. And you've got to start now. You've got to create a habit for it right now. So ask God to help you make the most of the time that you've been given. Because students, if we're going to live like Jesus, then we've got to pray like Jesus. We've got to pray as often as Jesus. And that's why we're looking at Jesus' prayer rhythms, because if we do not see his prayer rhythms and if we do not look at them intently, then we are going to miss the mark, and we're going to miss opportunities that we could have had in the presence of the Lord, where he can anoint that time and direct us in the places that we need to go, in the ways that we need to walk in. And so I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you tonight as you watch this to stop and just ask the Lord for forgiveness on anything that you have allowed as a distraction in your life, and you have put off time with Jesus in order to make room for the things that really don't matter. And so I want to encourage you to do that tonight. Thank you for watching. We're going to pick up in this story next week, and I cannot wait to teach this the rest of this story next week, as we look at another factor, another element and illustration that Jesus gives us, and how how important prayer was to him. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the Zoom call. Hey students, I hope you enjoyed that message on the ongoing life prayer rhythm that Jesus had as he got exhausted and as he dealt with the beginning of his ministry. And so I want you to ask yourself a couple of questions. How are you navigating your prayer life right now? Is prayer a priority for you? Are you starting every day with prayer? Are you praying when you're tired? Are you praying like Jesus? Because if you're not, I want to challenge you to do that. Because the reality of it is this: you are going to have to fight to find your eremos. You're going to have to fight to find your quiet place and your time to get away and pray and be in the presence of Jesus. Because it's in that prayer that you find your rest if you're tired. When you're tired, you can't allow the physical state of your being to overwhelm the spiritual state of your being. Because if you don't get the spiritual state of yourself in check and you don't rely on the Holy Spirit, you'll never completely find that rest that you're looking for. And I think that's what Jesus was doing when he did get up early in the morning and pray. He recognized that that's where his rest comes from, because Scripture says, Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are heavy burdened." Basically, come to me, who all who are exhausted and tired, and I will give you rest. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Remember that. Find your quiet place, find your quiet time, and be in the presence of Jesus every single day. We'll see you on the Zoom call as we discuss this message.